Welcome, everybody. We are very much looking forward to this session with you all. I guess before we start, some very brief introductions may be useful, because we thought what would be good today would be to have a conversation around the impact of AI, specifically through the lens of what it means for a learning and development organization like us and learning and development teams in corporate organizations. So we want it to be a rich, engaging conversation from three different perspectives and personas, hence there's three of us in the conversation today. And we're going to try and keep it as interactive as possible. We're going to be posing a few questions throughout and a poll. So we're really looking forward to your contribution in due course. So with that in mind, I might kick things off if that's okay, and then come to Laura and then Ben. My name is Matthew Prisco. I'm a Chief Product Officer at Hemsley Fraser. We provide corporate learning and development interventions for global organizations. And so one of the things that keeps me awake at night is what is the strategic impact of AI on our organization and also on our clients' organizations, specifically from an L&D perspective. So I'll be talking a bit around that later in the piece, and I'll hand over to who's directly below me in the chat, Ben. So if you want to go next, Ben, that'd be great.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ben George, and I'm an associate consultant with Hemsley Fraser. So I work with Matt and the team to provide solutions to clients. And I'm here today to share perspectives on how we've done that, share an example or two about how we've used generative AI to support solutions for our clients. So very excited to be in the conversation with you.
And hi, I'm Laura Walker, and I work with Hemsley Fraser on a part-time basis as a specialist advisor, really working on the latest trends and insight. My main perspective and role is as a researcher practitioner. So I'm a psychologist. I do lots of research. I'm currently doing a PhD. So I have a healthy skepticism and a desire for an evidence base. So you'll probably see that coming through today also.
Thanks, guys. So I think, one of the things we really want to get from this session specifically is to think about what opportunities we have with AI collectively in what we think the good bits are, but also recognize and acknowledge some of the potential risks, pitfalls that may be in play when you think about trying to grapple with the sort of massive subject, which is AI, because as we've been just sort of talking about, three different personas, three different perceptions, three different outlooks on what, where and how AI might be of assistance to us, specifically through the lens of AI. So if we just move on, the first thing we wanted to talk about, and myself in particular, was the strategic impact of L&D. So I think one of the things we're all very aware of, having been in the industry for any length of time, that the L&D folks amongst us, and probably more broadly than that in organizations, we love the current zeitgeist. So if you've been in the L&D industry any length of time, once upon a time, it was e-learning, and then it moved into mobile learning, and then it was gamification, video content. So we've seen lots of sort of emerging themes and trends over the years. I think, certainly from our perspective, they've all been good. They've all had, pluses and minuses. I think one of the things we want to think about, is how do we embrace AI and acknowledge and recognize that if we don't get it exactly right, it could actually have some damaging consequences on our organization. So one of the things we're looking at as an L&D company is thinking about how this, through what lens can we think about how AI is going to affect us and our customers. As a learning and development organization, our clients are looking for us for some guidance in and around kind of what good looks like from an adoption and utilization of AI. I think one of the things we wanted to sort of also say is, are we deep AI experts ourselves? No, and Hemsley Fraser is not trying or suggesting that they are AI experts in the development of the technology itself. But what we do have to try and do is work on a point of view in and around how we kind of bring it into our day-to-day lives. How do we use it as an ongoing tool? How do we help it develop our capabilities? And through that, we've and feel free to use this yourselves, we've built this voice model, which looks at a number of key things in and around how do you ascertain whether AI is going to create and generate value for your organization. what kind of outcomes can you expect from the adoption and utilization of an AI tool? What the experience is like for the end user, what can they expect to get from it from a learning perspective, a learning experience, and ultimately what the context is regards to, how does that tool show up in the organization? How does it fit with the rest of what your learning offer looks and feels like? Ultimately, it's about the impact. So really ask yourself the questions in and around what is it we're trying to do as an L&D function, where and how can it provide these kind of key metrics. And so, if you dig into you can dig into any of those in any order particularly, but if you kind of ask yourself the questions around value, if you use an AI tool to generate more content, certainly you could be potentially more productive, but if that content's not utilized or engaged, can it be utilized? Is it going to be good ROI if you've got more content? As we all know, there's a wealth of content out there, so more content doesn't necessarily equal better. Same as the experience, what does the end user really want to see? We all are familiar with the kind of notion of digital fatigue. So, just think about what the tool is actually doing and providing. So I think that's one model to look through. The other component part is AI principles. We, like many organizations, are in the foothills of this. So we are still sort of developing what we think, good looks like, trying to generate some best practice and so on. You could pick any one of these. I think, one of the key themes, and we'll come to this later in the piece with Laura, is thinking about boosting human skills. As more and more emerging technologies come through, the requirement for individuals and leaders in your business having the interaction with colleagues becomes more and more important, so that they can foster a learning culture and really help people through a transformation. Because when we kind of look at what's going on in the businesses we support, transformation and change is really at the core of everything that is underway currently. And it's because organizations are going through so much change, the way they interact with their customers, the way they're trying to do business, and they're looking at embracing all of these right tools. But if you don't have the human capability or human capability to begin with, then you'll struggle to deliver on that. I think another important part about what AI does and what it doesn't do. So there's, as we all know, there's a massive difference between knowledge find or knowledge share and learning. So what we think about as a learning organization is we have a very strict methodology when we apply, when we deliver any of our learning experiences. We always think about it through the lens of excite, engage, embed, and evolve. And that's a constant theme you see in any of our learning interventions. So when we think about AI, what, where, and how does it work? So you have to be kind of putting it always into the context of what you need it to be doing and be its master rather than the other way around. So there's a few points there for you to consider and mull over. Next in the piece, I wanted to ask my colleagues, Ben and Laura, a question. And the question is, do you think, guys, L&D needs to lead the way for the business with this adoption of AI? Is it L&D's job to kind of get AI into the organization? Laura, I'll come to you first, if I could.
Yeah, personally, I would value the context of the organization very highly. So in true psychology perspective, I'm going to say it depends on the system that you occupy. I mean, I've worked in 6 different industries, usually heading up L&D, talent management, etc. And they're very different in terms of the pace that they will take up something like this and the level of risk that they will adopt. So, for example, defense industry, engineering, pharma, they have very different profiles, for example, to retail or financial services. So I think it does depend, but I would say, certainly from my experience in pharma, that being a fast follower is the place to be. Yes. And I think in order to be a fast follower, you need to keep track of what's going on, but it doesn't mean that you have to throw yourself in at the deep end. I think you do have to keep track of what's going on and time your step in well. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Ben? What's your perspective?
I think, yeah, it's context dependent with all of the kind of solutions, I guess. I think the thing that I would kind of add to that is, I think it also depends on to what extent is AI, or particularly generative AI and AI tools, going to affect the roles within the organization, and mean that you are going to be at a competitive advantage or less so. So, and I think that sort of boils down to the amount of reskilling and to the extent of which reskilling becomes a strategic initiative, or as part of like a larger change initiative. So I think it's dependent on the context of which the organization is going to be affected by what this future sort of technology and the current technology is looking like. So, and that seems to be reflective in some of the clients that we're working with. They're beginning to sort of map out what the impact is on roles, and see where these technologies can help, and what the reskilling or relearning initiatives can do to support. So it's not the only thing, it's part of the solution.
Yeah, connected to that, Ben, and sort of follow-on question was in around, do you think this is a new toy with a limited shelf life, or is this something L&D folks should be putting a lot of focus and attention on? I'll come to you first, as you're in the chair, as they were saying.
Okay, so I'm the enthusiast who will go out and try. So I'll go in with the optimistic. I do think it's a new shiny toy. When I started using this in January last year, I was really taken aback by it, and it did seem to solve an awful lot of solutions, particularly somebody that's dyslexic. Just simple things like being able to write a decent, fast email response was sort of really just blew me away, and its ability to do so many things. Very quickly lost trust with it or confidence with the tool, a couple of weeks in, couple of months in perhaps. And there needed to be something else that I needed to sort of tweak and improve. So there's this sort of Dunning-Kruger effect, where we have this sort of overconfidence in the tech, we lose it, and then you sort of there's a sort of middle path. I'll hand over to Laura, who I know will be a different perspective on this.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't think it is a new tool anyway. So I think, we all know that AI has been around in some form or another. Clearly, there's been an acceleration recently with Gen AI. So I'm generally a believer in there's not really a very new tool ever, if I'm completely honest. There's usually some kind of foundation in a dim and distant history. But I think the good news for humanity is that we're generally very good at responding to disruptive change. So I kind of have faith that even if it is a new tool, or if there's new versions of the tool, that they will evolve, and that as we will evolve as well. But certainly I won't be using it to write all of my stuff yet. For me, I'd say it does about 20%. I think some people think it does 80% of content writing. I'm more on the 20% to the spectrum.
Okay. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, what we'd like to do now is bring you folks into this conversation. So we've got a poll for you. We'll just go move on to the next slide. The question, or the poll question at least, is how often do you think L&D are using Gen AI for L&D specifically? Because it'd be really interesting to get a sort of a pulse check of how often you guys use this. So we're just going to let these results come in. Oh, I'm trying to vote and I can't.
I know, I tried to vote too.
I mean, something certainly from the UK market specific research suggests that 40% of organisations in the UK have never used AI to create anything specifically for the L&D function. 30% claim they use it rarely. So maybe they're at the they've tried it and fallen out of love with it, like Ben, and 20% say sometimes. So it's a very mixed bag, and I think I think the takeaway certainly from the UK, and it'll be interesting to see what you guys vote. We're very much at we're in the embryonic stages of really kind of getting this into day-to-day use as a successful tool in L&D. I'm just going to see, Dee, do we get, apologies, I can't see the poll results. I don't know if, here they come. Okay. So yeah, it's interesting. There's some very early adopters who always use it, which is great to see. Yeah, I guess, yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag really. Probably not far away from where the UK market is also using L&D. So with that in mind, let me just transition on to my next slide. In the chat, can you guys just put in how, for those that said they are using it, if you could just put into the chat one of these three options, that'd be really interesting, because these are the ways we can see it being utilized, but it'd also be interesting to know from yourselves whether there's any other areas that you can see value in, or other experiences of how you might be using it currently. Because one of the things I think we've been grappling with is the idea of AI being able to create more content. You know, as Ben was articulating, he can use it to kind of write documents, maybe even write some content. We've been looking as an L&D organization, looking at branch learning scenarios, the idea of AI as a coach. There's lots of different ways we can kind of create more content. I guess the question really is for us always to think, is more content good? And is there other ways in which we could be using AI, perhaps more from a curation? Because, you know, my personal opinion is less is more. So it's about contextualization and relevance, and really a positive learning experience, rather than reams and reams of material that you can read. So, you know, there's different ways in which you can slice and dice this. And I think that is a neat segue into our next part, which is really looking at, you know, not forgetting, whilst this emerging technology is great, there is also a strong requirement to ensure human skills are on point. So with that, I'm going to transition over to my colleague, Laura, who's going to take us through this next section.
Brilliant, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier on, I'm a psychologist, so I'm going to bring the human skills angle into the conversation, but also to look at some of the risks and opportunities that present themselves. So I'm going to just share with you in a second some research that won't be a surprise to many of you about which are the top human skills that are coming through. So if you can nudge us on, please, Matthew, that would be amazing. Thank you. Okay, so what we're finding from the various lists of what are the top skills for this year and going forward is that human skills are becoming more important, not less. So even with the emergence of AI and Gen AI, we are finding that these things are going even higher up the list. And for us to thrive in an AI-driven workplace, some of these things are going to become even more important. So, for example, around critical thinking, as we are evaluating the results that we get from our various chats with AI, that will become probably even more so. So what you can see here on the left is a list from our own Hemsley Fraser survey, but it's also very aligned with the World Economic Forum and other bodies and their lists of the top human skills, or the top skills, soft skills and otherwise, that are relevant for today. And on the right hand side, you can see our management and leadership framework that we have at Hemsley Fraser, and these are the top 10 capabilities, and we don't anticipate any of these diminishing in importance. If anything, they may take on a slightly different flavor in an AI-driven world. So we'll come on to that in a minute with some examples about what being authentic might mean in an AI-driven world, or what connecting and building connectedness might mean in an AI-driven world. But they're still relevant. It's just how we go about them might be a bit different. If I can nudge you on, please. Matthew, sir. Okay, so the three risks I'm going to share as a perspective, so a point of view on opportunities and risks. They're kind of two sides of the same coin. So what we find from a human psychology point of view is when these are present in abundance, people learn best. So if they are feeling really connected, like they belong somewhere, because we are wired to connect as humans, so we're wired neurologically and rewarded hormonally for connections. So if that is lacking in your AI enhanced learning, it's going to diminish the impact. But if in some way you can boost the connectedness using AI, then you've got a chance of even greater impact. So both sides of the coin you need to pay attention to. Matthew's already mentioned the 4 E's, but there are opportunities to boost excitement, for example, or engagement. So in some ways, it's easier to create content that can be more engaging if you use some of the tools that are available to help you do that, like avatars or a whole variety of different tools. I think some of you in the chat were talking about conversation, using AI to practice conversations with people, so using AI generated conversation. So that would be a risk. So if you just basically say, right, go and find the answer yourself through a chat tool, ChatGPT, for example, then chances are you're just not going to get the learning, because very few people will change their behavior just by reading something. You just don't get that happening. In order to shift behavior, they need to embed the learning. They need to connect it with experiences they've already got in their mind, in their brain, basically. And then you need to evolve the learning, so it needs to be even more relevant. So again, a risk and opportunity. And the final image you have here is talking about the response to uncertainty. So we know it's an uncertain world, and obviously AI is bringing its own uncertainty. And what we know from research into organizations is that when they can provide, and leaders also, when leaders can provide enough stability for people, but also be agile enough to respond to things that emerge, they are 75% more likely to be in the top 25% of companies for organizational health. So the trick with AI is to provide enough stability, so enough certainty about what's okay, what's not okay, but also enough agility to respond to what's going on. And again, if you don't do that, so if you don't provide enough stability with your approach to AI, chances are people's learning will be reduced. So just interesting.
Yeah, very interesting, Laura. And I'd like to ask you both a question at this point, connected to that. On a scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you for the future of human skills, and why? So Ben, do you want to have a stab at that one first?
So 10 is high concern, 1 is low concern. I'm going to go.
Could be either way, actually. I didn't. Yeah, whichever way you want to interpret it. 10 being high. Yeah.
I'd be interested to get the group on this as well in terms of the chat. 10 being a high concern for human skills, 1 being a low concern. Forever the optimist, I'm going to go in as a 3. So relatively low concern. Crikey, look at this. We've got a few high scores going into the chat, and I'll give you the reason why. I think we are extremely adaptable, and as much as many of us, I'm sure, have been made slightly nervous by the capability of some of these tools for our jobs and for our colleagues, and how it will perhaps displace the future of work, I think we're adaptable. I think in terms of how human skills can be supported, will be dependent on how much of a strategic support and initiative will be deployed within organizations. So people will be helped through training initiatives, along with other ways to help develop those necessary skills. So it won't necessarily directly, it will have a direct impact on human skills, but I think with the right conditions, it can be well supported. Yeah, that would be my view. So maybe a 2 or a 3, depending on the level of support.
Well, I can offer you a healthy 7, if that's just to offer a different perspective. And I think I might have some friends in the chat. I think you also have, Ben, too. So my skepticism is kind of in the short term. I'm slightly worried that we might get distracted onto AI and kind of ignore some of the things that we know are enduring and even more important in the way that we just said. I'm generally have faith in humanities, as I said earlier on, but I'm slightly worried that we'll lurch to some kind of weird and wonderful controls that I don't think is particularly what we need in the world of AI.
Thanks, Laura. And I kind of agree with you both. And certainly from my perspective, what I'm seeing in our clients that are asking for help in building out management and leadership capability is this idea of equipping managers and leaders and individual contributors to a certain extent with a certain skill set. And I think that skill set of capability is certainly different to what it was pre-pandemic. So how people show up in organizations is changing. How managers and leaders are meant to engage with their teams, with each other, is changing. So I think what, we can't, to Laura's point, we shouldn't and can't take the eye off the ball, because ultimately it doesn't matter what technology you have in an organization. We firmly believe that people are still and will always be your best asset. So with that in mind, it'd be really interesting to see what you folks think are the most important human skills, certainly in the context of this emerging technology in a Gen AI world, matrix world. So we're going to bring up another poll now. So it'd be really interesting if you folks could have a think about what you think are the most important and let us know why. So if we could bring up the poll, please, Dee. I'll just let you guys have a think about that momentarily. It's like I could argue that they're all equally important. Okay, so a few more seconds and then hopefully we'll get the results. And if there's anything on the list that you think is more important, feel free to pop it into chat. It'd be good to see other ideas coming into this as well.
I think you might have asked a tough question there, Matthew.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Dee, are we going to? Here we go. What are we? The critical thinking. Yeah. Interesting. Communication and change is so low in that equation. We could spend the next hour or more discussing that. Sadly, we don't have time. So thanks everyone for putting in your perspective there. We're just going to move on in the discussion now, moving into the innovation space. We've got practical ideas on how you can use AI. So with that, we're going to get the super fan on the call or in the conversation, Ben, to pick up this part of the conversation.
Thanks, Matthew. If you jump to the next slide for us, that'd be great. It's been lovely. Thank you everybody for sharing your thoughts in the chat. Clearly there's an enthusiasm for this, and I saw the scores coming in earlier. And then we've seen some examples in the chat already. So there seems to be lots of different ways people have been using, particularly generative AI. And on the screen, you can see just some examples of the way that we've been using some of the approaches particularly to generative AI, particularly with ChatGPT, and trying to play around with making it useful and effective based on our kind of experiences. So I'm going to pull out just a couple of examples of these on our following slide. But I think the one I found particularly useful with our clients is when exploring things like performance support and job aids, as well as some of the experiences that Matthew alluded to. And we'll come on to some specific examples of those in a minute. And some of the sort of more I think, latest updates that we've found particularly useful. I think ultimately, if I was to sort of summarize what I've seen in the chat, one of the challenges with this new bit of technology is the fact that we can kind of lose confidence with it quite quickly. And that's been my experience from being somebody that was just amazed by its capability, still am, to then moving into sort of a lack of confidence in it. You have to do a lot of the checking, and that sort of, I don't want to be doing the checking. I want it to do it more effectively. So we have to apply some human aspect of critical thinking, some of the things we've just been speaking about. So if I could ask you to go to the next slide, and I'll give you a couple of examples of that I think I found particularly useful working with some of our clients. So it's not all about training. It's also thinking about how you enable people to, frankly, just be better at their job. They don't need to go on courses. So what I found particularly useful is the ability to generate performance support tools. So that could be a checklist for a new manager, the things to do and not do over the first 90 days or 30 days. Could be a checklist or a worksheet that it creates based on how to have a difficult conversation, the typical challenges that people wrestle and struggle with. So that's been a really useful one. And from our client's perspective, we're able to build out those tools a lot faster than we're able to before. Still need the human touch. You still need to have the expertise to be able to qualify the outputs, of course, but that seems to be an area that has had a huge impact. So performance support tools. The next one is was around how we can increase the speed, and I'd argue as well the quality of the learning experiences that we can create. So some of the things that I'm sure many of you that are in this space that design and develop solutions, often, you know, we can sort of spend a lot of time figuring things out, and ChatGPT can put together a relatively complex simulation that would take, frankly, me days and a team of us days quite quickly. So we can create complex decision tree scenarios and simulations that really do challenge the learner in, just say, a facilitated synchronous environment. And I think that's been quite useful as well to challenge what we can do. We all get stuck in our kind of ways of doing things, and, you know, just using it as a simple brainstorming tool that helps us then pick into more complex, more interesting challenges for our solutions. So those would be the ones that we were up to last year and we've been sort of exploring and developing. This year, it's all been about AI, developing AI mentors. So probably wouldn't use the word coach for this. So without being too pedantic on the terms, and what ChatGPT has been able to release in the last few weeks has been able to basically qualify the data that it uses. So we now can build our own GPTs for our programs that are content specific and topic specific based on the content we want to feed it. So rather than relying on this huge database of data that it's using that can often hallucinate, now we can hone it down to specific content that we want it to use and generate. So for each topic, for example, on a program that we want, let's say a management leadership program to be focused around, we can now program that or give the right kind of data to the GPT that then supplements the outcomes. So for example, let's use challenging conversations. We can use our framework to have a challenging conversation. So if a manager ever needs to quickly find out a quick sheet or get some advice, we've got 24 hours access to a challenging conversation mentor that can provide a much more high quality response to their need when they need it. So it's in the flow of work. It can be on their mobile phone, for example. So the ability to build your own GPTs, content specific, organization specific, came out a couple of weeks back, and we've fortunately been able to start the work on testing that with a client, one of our global sort of clients in the insurance industry, on how we provide that as an additional tool to help managers develop their capabilities. So those would be our three areas. The one on the right is probably the more recent. Last literally few weeks we've been testing that, and we'll be getting it out into the program in the next, well, we're launching on Friday. So I'm hoping we can do that quite quickly.
Cool. Okay, with that in mind, just a final question really to sort of discuss as a group would be, how much time and investment do you think L&D should be putting into this at the moment? What's your take, Laura?
As an L&D function,
yes,
or as an L&D team? Yeah. Well, I'm the fast follower philosophy, so I do think it's worth keeping up to date with what's going on, and always believing curiosity and getting ideas. So I think it is worth putting some time into it. There might be a member of the team who is more adept than others, so they could be the champion for it. So I wouldn't say loads, but I would say, be ready to shift when you need to.
Yeah. And Ben?
So the question's around how much focus should it be?
Yeah.
I think there's two areas of focus, or two maybe broad strategies to think about. One is getting people that are enthusiasts to play with it, find out what works and what doesn't. So that's sort of like almost like an incubator hub of people within your team to try and do that. They inform the rest of the folks. They're perhaps a little bit more skeptical or less willing to focus. And I think there needs to be perhaps another sort of strand, which is governance, right? So, you know, a decision-making, operational, sort of more broad strategic team that help decide what goes and what doesn't. You know, I can see people writing in the chat around data and security, things like that, which are obviously a concern. So yeah, those would be my two. In terms of effort, I think this is, I was looking at some of the comments coming through earlier. I do think this is an iPhone moment, right? Where, you know, 2007, the iPhone was launched, that touchscreen thing. And if you listen to that launch, you could hear people gasping in the background. I'd be one of those people with ChatGPT, and just look at how these sort of phones have, you know, influenced our livelihood. You know, they're, you know, my kids barely speak to me anymore based on their phone obsession. So I think it's as big as that. You know, it's going to be, I think it's going to be transformative, and therefore we need to help people maximize the potential for it.
Great, thanks, Ben. You know, for me, I think, you know, a combination of both of what you said. I think, you know, as L&D functions, you have to be experimenting and innovating. You have to be kind of formulating your own perspective on how this can work for you, because it's kind of Wild West at the moment. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to kind of take on board. But if you're not experimenting and trying, then you're probably behind the curve. So it's really about trying to get on the wave and ride it to the best of your abilities, as they say. Quick question before we go to Q&A. Getting back to the room, what barriers do you think there are to adopt AI? It'd be really interesting. I know some of you have been posting this in the chat already, but what do you think are some of the sort of fundamental barriers to kind of try and get that experimentation underway? Just give you a couple of seconds to do that. There you go. Security, number one. Yeah, as we said earlier in the piece, there are, you know, whilst it presents massive opportunities, as we've said throughout the piece, I think governance and security is something absolutely you've got to get your house in order just to avoid any potential risks, because whilst there is huge amounts of opportunities, there's some also fairly obvious pitfalls. So thanks everybody for that. We've got one or two more slides to get through. We've got, I think, four or so minutes left, so we'd love to kind of open this up to Q&A. Dee, I'll let you sort of take over the facilitation of this part to ask, you know, how you want people to put in their questions, or to open the floor up to those that want to contribute to the conversation.
Yes, absolutely. You can drop your questions into the Q&A panel, and I have a couple that I've picked up from the chat. One was, can you provide a specific example for building connectedness into learning alongside AI?
Well, interestingly, yeah. So when I was in a pharmaceutical company a while back, one of the things they did was they used AI in their email system. So they used it to analyze the email system to see who was sending emails about a topic, and then they could share that. So who was it? And it was kind of working as knowledge management, basically. So they knew who was interested in a topic, and then they could share and connect people who were also emailing on that topic. So they didn't need a separate knowledge management system. They could use AI to help them do that. So that's just a very practical, quick example.
Let's see. Martin wants to know, how would you see AI working alongside an LMS? With parentheses, the hub.
Yeah. Hey, Martin, nice to see you or hear from you. To me, the AI has to be integrated into the LMS. I've got some fairly controversial ideas around how and where LMS market is going to go, but I envisage, with AI creating more opportunities for integration, LMS is going to become less relevant. So I think it's really about embedding the search capabilities to kind of do that content curation for you into the LMS. If you're looking at it through the lens of that kind of application, because obviously, as we've been saying throughout, there's other ways you can use AI in content curation, etc. And content writing, but if you're using it as for its search functionality and capabilities and curation capabilities, it has to be integrated. So, you know, I'd be asking your LMS providers how and where they're putting in the AI.
Let's see. Kim points out that there is a wealth of information, possibly overwhelming information. You know, do you have any advice for sifting through all that to figure out which partner you should use?
We do. So let me.
You want to jump on, Matthew, because there's some.
Yes, we've got some insights here, which we thank you whoever teed that up. Perfect segue into one of our final slides, which is we're always looking at resources that help formulate our ideas. There's loads of people out there doing similar research to us, including, you know, all of your good selves. These are 2 recommended pieces of reading. So if you just get your phones out, you can scan these and read the corresponding information. And Hemsley Fraser themselves have also done a series of podcasts on this, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, which you can find on Spotify and other locations. I'm conscious, Dee, that we are approaching.
I don't know if you can squeeze in one more quick question.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, sorry, I thought Ben was going to answer one. Let's see. Manuel wants to know if AI is going to substitute humans.
Well, Elon Musk thinks we won't need to go to work soon, so I'm well up for that. So whenever that happens,
I see he's also asked about AI in the coaching approach, so using AI as a coach, and I've seen AI worked in a couple of particularly good ways. Actually, I wouldn't say it ever replaces coaching. I mean, I do coaching, and I wouldn't say it replaces a human coach over a period of time, but I think it can be really useful to help self-coach. So I think if there's an occasion where you could self-coach, I think it can be particularly useful. And also I've seen it work really well where people are practicing giving feedback. And there's evidence to show that people give more effective feedback to an avatar than they do when they're doing a strange role play, which we all hate doing in training courses anyway. So in replacement for that, it can be a really good way to practice some of those human skills that we were talking about earlier on.
Well, once again, we have run out of time, but I would like to thank all of you for providing such fantastic information, and hope that people will connect with you afterward to continue this conversation.
Thanks, everyone.